Hey guys, Miss Dyer here, and today we're going to be looking at actions of muscles. Um, I had thought about putting this unit off until a little bit later, but at this point, we really don't know how long we're going to be out of school, and so um, I thought we would go ahead and we would do this unit, and we'll look at just human muscles. We'll look at diagrams of human muscles, and we'll go ahead and learn about the main human muscles uh, from diagrams. And then uh, when we get to come back to school, if we get to come back to school, which is all still up in the air right now, but hopefully we will get to. I'm ready to come back already because I know this has been a struggle for me, so I'm sure it is for you as well. Um, when and if we get to come back to school, we will still get out the rabbits. We will look at some of the major muscles that we talk about with humans on the rabbits as well because they're very similar. And then we'll also get to look at the internal organs of the rabbit, such as the heart as well as the digestive organs. So I'm hoping and praying that we will get back to school pretty soon. At this point, none of us really know. Um, they just keep shutting down more and more things, and so I just really at this point don't know how things are going to go, but I am hoping and praying all the time that we will get to come back to school so that we can continue on. I know that this has been uh, pretty difficult for me trying to transition everything to online and remember everything that I need to make sure that I give you guys everything that you need to do what I need you to do, and as well as paper copies for those who want or need those. And I'm still working on it. It's just crazy. It's been a real struggle for me, and I'm sure it has for you too. And I'm asking you to please let me know uh, if there's anything that isn't clear to you, anything that you need help with, anything that you don't understand, because I'm flying blind here for the most part, just like I'm sure everyone else is. And if you don't let me know the issues that you have, the struggles that you're having, the things that you don't understand or that I'm not making clear for you, then I don't know that. So please email me if you have questions. Send me a message on Google Classroom. We can make an arrangement for me to call you. We can do a FaceTime, a Skype, whatever the case may be. Just please reach out to me if you're having any kind of trouble understanding, if I'm not making something clear, if you don't know what to do, please let me know, because in my head, what I'm putting on here, what I'm sending out to you guys makes sense. But then it's already happened more than once that I've had to take a second look. I've had to step back and say, wait a minute, this is not clear. They're not going to know what to do. They're not going to know what I want. And I've had to kind of make revisions. So like I said, it makes sense to me when I put it out there for you guys, but if it doesn't make sense to you, then please let me know, because if it's not making sense to one person, it's probably not making sense to more than one person. So please let me know so that I can try to work on things, make things clearer for you, and help you understand these things, and make the assignments and things that I want from you clear. Um, so I have posted this PowerPoint on our Google Classroom. I have also posted this document. Um, this document I have put on here so that you can print out and take notes. You can make notes as you watch this video, as you look through the PowerPoint, as you watch some of the other videos that I'm going to talk about that you're going to need to watch. Um, so so that's the reason this document is here. Um, I'm not going to say that you have to um, print it out um, and write notes on it. You don't have to do that, because I'm going to be posting a Google assignment where you're going to answer some questions for me about this, and I'm going to count that as part of your notebook grade for this second 9 weeks. But I know a lot of people are like me, and they like having a piece of paper that they can write on. Instead of having to click back and forth to look for things, they like having a piece of paper where as they watch a video, as they look at material, they can take notes and write things down, and then they have that to look at as they answer questions, and to study and to help them remember what they saw or read. So I'm putting this on here so that you can print it off and take notes on it. Um, I'm not saying that you have to do that. I just know a lot of people like that, like to have that option. Also, um, I will have copies of this at the high school. If you're one of the people that told me that you wanted paper copies of the materials, I will have copies of this at the high school where that you can pick up. You can go in there and tell them that you're needing Miss Dyer's anatomy uh, assignments or anatomy materials or notes or whatever, and they will uh, get those for you so that you will have those. So that you'll have those to use. So you can actually pick up a paper copy of the PowerPoint. You can pick up a paper copy of this document and any other documents that I'm posting for you. You can pick up at the school. If you are someone who needs paper copies or just wants to have those, you can pick them up at the high school. So anyway, this is the document that I've posted along with the PowerPoint. I will also be posting a Google assignment where you will answer some questions. And I will count that as a notebook grade. I will also be posting a quiz over these things right here, the actions of muscles, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. So again, please let me know if there's anything that you don't understand, that you have questions about, or anything that I'm not making clear. Send me an email, send me a message on Google Classroom. Please reach out to me because I want you to be able to understand what I'm asking for. Okay, so looking at this PowerPoint, that's what we're going to go over today. This first video is going to have answers to some of these questions. If I go back to this document, this first video has these things, the five rules for muscles. Now, these are not really rules. These are like generalizations. This is important information that it's good for you to know and remember as we talk about muscles and their anatomy as well as their action or their function, the movement that they cause. So this video, you definitely want to watch this because it will have this information here about the 5 rules for muscles. It also will have some video of a guy doing some of the actions that of muscles that we'll be talking about here in a few minutes. Again, these actions are movements that muscles make, and it's hard to understand a movement just by looking at a the power just went off a second ago, so now I'm totally distracted. Sorry. It's hard to understand a movement that a muscle makes just by looking at a picture. So therefore, it's good to have a video of someone doing those movements. So this video will have some of that. It also will talk about some of the muscles that help to that cause that movement, that contract and cause that movement. So therefore, that is going to kind of introduce you to some of the names of these muscles, which we'll get more into next week. Today, we just mainly want to look at the actions, but this is going to introduce you to some of the names of the muscles. This second part here, the 7 criteria that may be used in naming a muscle, I'm not sure. I don't remember if he covers it in this video or not, but I do know that it is also covered in this video on slide 25. So again, don't forget to watch that video as well because that is covered on slide 25. So those two parts of this document are covered in the videos. Some of this information that we'll be looking at is also in the videos. It talks about it in the videos, but I will also be talking about it in this video, and it's on the PowerPoint. So you're going to be getting some of this information, like especially this stuff here about the origin, insertion, and all this stuff. You're also going to be getting it on the videos as well as in this video and on the PowerPoint. So, but definitely you've got to watch the videos for this first page here. The second and third page, you can use the PowerPoint, and you can also use the videos to get that information. So moving on, when we talk about a muscle, it's important to realize that a muscle is attached on both ends. Remember, these are skeletal muscles, and they're attached to bones. So the skeletal muscle, this muscle is attached to a bone on each end. And those two ends where the muscle is attached have different names. One is called the origin, the other is called the insertion or the point of insertion or the insertion point, but always insertion is in the name. So one of those two ends where the muscle is attached is called the origin. The other end is called the insertion. Well, how do we know which one is the origin, which one is the insertion? Well, again, both ends, this muscle is attached to a bone. So this origin and the insertion point will always be a bone. Now, a lot of times you may read that it's a certain part of that bone. But again, in the end, it's a bone. Like, for example, you may read that the origin or the insertion is the intertubercular groove of the humerus. Okay, well, the intertubercular groove is just a part of the humerus bone. The actual bone is the humerus. So don't let all the different little parts of the bone confuse you. The main thing when I'm asking you about an origin and insertion, which I will be asking you more about those specifically for different muscles next week, when I ask you about an origin and insertion, I'm looking for a bone. What bone is the origin? What bone is the insertion? So, what is an origin of a muscle? What is an insertion of a muscle? Well, again, obviously, as I just said, it is the point of, it is the ends of the muscle where the muscle is attached to a bone. So the origin will be a bone, the insertion will be a bone. The origin is the end of the muscle that is attached to the bone where there is going to be very little movement. This is the end of the muscle where the muscle is anchored. If you think about how an anchor, when you drop an anchor off a boat, it goes down to the bottom and it anchors the boat in that location. There's not really going to be any movement at the anchor. The anchor is going to be very heavy and it's going to sit there on the bottom and it doesn't move. So the origin is the anchor. The origin is the end of the muscle where the muscle is attached to the bone, where it is anchored, and there's not really going to be a lot of movement there. Now, there could be a little movement at the origin, but not very much. This is the anchor point of the bone. So the origin is the bone where the muscle is attached and anchored, and there's going to be very little movement there. The insertion is the other end of the muscle. It's the end of the muscle that is attached to the bone that is to be moved. So there is going to be a lot of movement at the insertion. Okay? An example that the guy, if you've already watched the video that was on the previous, that was on the slide at the beginning of this PowerPoint, the example that he gave was the biceps brachii and the triceps brachii. If we look at the biceps brachii, okay, the biceps brachii is attached at two ends. On one end, remember the biceps brachii also is in your upper arm. It's your upper arm muscle that's kind of like on the anterior side of your upper arm. When that biceps brachii is attached at the shoulder, it's attached to the shoulder blade, which is the scapula, and it's attached to your forearm, to your radius, which remember is the lateral forearm bone. It's the forearm bone on your thumb side. So the biceps brachii is attached to the scapula, which is your shoulder blade, and to the radius, which is your lateral forearm bone. The biceps brachii, where it is attached to the scapula, that is the origin of the biceps brachii. So the scapula would be considered the origin of the biceps. There's not going to be a lot of movement there. The insertion of the biceps is the radius. It's that lateral forearm bone. So what that tells me is, okay, when the biceps brachii contracts, there's not going to be a lot of movement up here at the shoulder, because the shoulder blade, the scapula, is where that biceps brachii is anchored. When the biceps brachii contracts, there is going to be a lot of movement at the radius, at the forearm. It's going to move the forearm, the radius, because that's the insertion. That's where the movement happens. Specifically, when the biceps brachii contracts, it flexes the forearm. What this means is that it pulls the forearm up toward the humerus. So again, we don't have that scapula really being moved when the biceps brachii contracts, because that's the origin. We have the radius being moved when that biceps brachii contracts. It moves that radius. It pulls it up toward the upper arm, okay, toward the humerus and the scapula, and that's called flexion. Okay, so again, when the muscle contracts, it causes a movement. That movement is considered to be the action of the muscle. So for the biceps brachii, the action of the biceps brachii is flexion of the forearm. Forearm flexion. So when the biceps brachii contracts, it flexes the forearm. This means it moves the forearm, okay, the insertion, the radius, up toward the humerus or the scapula, the upper arm. And so that is another thing. In general, when a muscle contracts, the insertion is generally moved closer to the origin. of the muscle. So when our biceps brachii contracts, it flexes the forearm, it moves that insertion, the radius, closer to that origin, which is the scapula, because it pulls that forearm up toward the upper arm. We also have to consider that when these muscles are working, when they're moving, when they're contracting and causing their functions, their actions to occur, they don't work alone. That you have groups of muscles that work together. These groups of muscles that work together are called synergists. Okay? If we talk about the biceps brachii again, we talk about forearm flexion. The biceps brachii flexes the forearm. It moves the forearm toward the upper arm. But it doesn't work alone. There are other muscles that help the biceps brachii do that job. Examples of other muscles that help the biceps brachii are the brachioradialis and the brachialis. Okay? Now, the muscle that does most of that movement, if we're talking, let's say, about forearm flexion here, the muscle that does most of that movement is called the prime mover or the agonist. So when we talk about forearm flexion, the biceps brachii flexes the forearm. So does the brachialis and the brachioradialis. They all three work together to do that. The muscle that causes most of the forearm flexion is the brachialis. Okay, so that brachialis would be considered the prime mover of forearm flexion. Okay, then the brachialis and the biceps brachii would be considered synergists. Okay, they are actually all three of those muscles together are considered synergists. The group of muscles that's working together to flex the forearm are synergists. Okay, so the biceps brachii, the brachialis, and the brachioradialis are synergists. They all work together. Since the brachialis causes most of that forearm flexion, it would be considered the prime mover or the agonist. But again, the biceps brachii and the brachioradialis also flex the forearm. So working together, they all three are called synergists because they all work together. But the prime mover, the agonist, is the is the brachialis. Then we can look at the antagonist. The antagonist is a muscle that resists the action of the prime mover. It is responsible for movement in the opposite direction. So again, if we say the brachialis is the prime mover of forearm flexion, however, the brachioradialis and the biceps brachii also help to flex the forearm. They move the forearm toward, or they pull it up and move it toward the scapula, which is the shoulder blade. The opposite action then of flexion would be extension. And we'll learn more about flexion and extension in just a minute. But however, if flexing is pulling the forearm up, then extension is moving it back down, straightening it out to its original position. Okay, so the muscle or muscles that extend the forearm would be an antagonist. So the muscle that extends the forearm is the triceps brachii, which is on the back of your upper arm. It's on the posterior side of your upper arm. So when the triceps brachii contracts, it extends the forearm. So if the biceps brachii flexes the forearm, then the triceps brachii is an antagonist. It extends the forearm, so it's an antagonist to the biceps brachii. So biceps brachii flexes the forearm, pulls it up. Then the triceps brachii lowers it. It extends it. So the triceps brachii is an antagonist to the biceps brachii. But which muscle is an agonist and which muscle is an antagonist depends upon which action you're talking about. If we're talking about forearm flexion, then the biceps brachii is an agonist. The triceps brachii is an antagonist. So we could say the biceps brachii is the agonist of forearm flexion. The triceps brachii is the antagonist for forearm flexion because it does the opposite action. However, let's say we want to talk about forearm extension. Okay, if we're talking about forearm extension, which is straightening the forearm, then the triceps brachii is the agonist of forearm extension, and then the biceps brachii would be an antagonist of forearm extension. So again, it depends upon which action you're talking about. If we're talking about forearm flexion, then the biceps brachii is an agonist and the triceps brachii is an antagonist. But if we're talking about forearm extension, then the triceps brachii is the agonist and the biceps brachii is the antagonist. Okay, and so then what we have is an antagonistic pair. An antagonistic pair is two muscles that have opposite actions on the same body part. So, for example, again, when we're talking about forearm flexion, the biceps brachii is the agonist, the triceps brachii is the antagonist. But we could also say, okay, the brachialis is an agonist, and the triceps brachii is an antagonist, and the brachioradialis is an agonist, and the triceps brachii is an antagonist. So all of those muscles that flex the forearm are the agonists of forearm flexion, and then the triceps brachii would be the antagonist of forearm flexion. Okay, so when we talk about muscles, we talk about these antagonistic pairs because we have two muscles. We're talking about two muscles that have opposite actions on the same body part. So the biceps flexes, the triceps extends. That's an antagonistic pair. We could also say the brachialis flexes, the triceps extends. The brachioradialis flexes, the triceps extends. Any of those would be considered antagonistic pairs because they include two muscles that do opposite actions. So why is this so important? Well, the reason is because you guys, when muscles contract, they shorten and they pull one bone toward another. Muscles can only shorten, they can only pull, they cannot push. And so, therefore, you must have a muscle that does the opposite action to return that muscle to its original position. So, we can't have a single muscle that pulls the forearm up and then pushes it back down. Muscles can't push. They only pull. They only contract and shorten and pull on bones. Muscles only pull on bones. They do not push on bones. So, therefore, we have to have one muscle that pulls the bone in one direction and then another muscle that contracts and pulls the bone in the opposite direction. So when the biceps brachii contracts, it pulls the forearm up. It flexes it. When the triceps brachii contracts, it pulls the forearm back down and extends it. Okay? So since muscles can only pull, you have to have two muscles that are pulling in opposite directions to move that bone one direction and then return it to its original position. So when we talk about these actions of muscles that we're going to be talking about, most of them exist in opposite actions. You have opposite actions. One pulls the bone one direction, the other, then we have the bone being pulled in the opposite direction. So we have opposite actions that we will be talking about. So talking about flexion and extension, we've already been going over this. Here we're showing flexion at the knee, but again, it happens at the elbow as well. So flexion is bending a joint so that the angle at that joint decreases. So when we bend our knee so that we move our foot toward our thigh, like we see here, we bend it so it's straight and we bend it, then that is flexion. Again, decreasing the angle. Here the knee is straight. As we pull it toward our thigh or our buttocks, then we decrease the angle at that knee. And so that is considered flexion. Extension is just the opposite. It is, now here, this is showing flexion. This arrow is showing flexion, but if we had another red arrow going the opposite direction, straightening that knee back out, that would be extension. Here we're showing flexion and extension at the elbow. Extension is straightening the joint so that the angle at the joint increases. So again, it's flexed right now. In this position, it's flexed. We have pulled the forearm up toward the scapula, so that is, the elbow is flexed. So if we had a black arrow pointing in this direction, that would be flexion. However, what we're showing here, this arrow is showing, okay, we're taking it from this flexed position, we're taking it from this bent position, and we're straightening back out. That is what that arrow is showing us, straightening back out. That is elbow extension or extension of the forearm. So straightening the joint is extension, bending it so that you decrease the angle, that is flexion. Adduction, you guys, when I look at adduction, I look at the beginning here, add. I'm adding a body part back toward my body, back toward the midline of my body. So what I'm doing is I'm moving an appendage, it's going to be my arm or my leg, toward the midline of my body. So standing in the straight position, or I'm sorry, if you have your leg out away from your body and you bring it back toward your body, that is adduction. Okay, so if we're standing in a straight position and we move it outward, okay, so if we had a black arrow pointing the opposite direction, we move it outward, that is called abduction. And then if it's already moved outward and we bring it back toward the middle of our body, toward the midline, that is adduction. So again, taking this limb that I have away from my body and moving it back toward my body. I'm adding it back toward my body, moving it back toward the midline of the body. That is adduction. So I think of add. I'm adding my appendage back to my body, adding it to my body, bringing it from out back in. That is adduction. Abduction is just the opposite. Again, you can do this with an arm or a leg. So if you have your arm or your leg down and then you move it away from the midline of your body, that is abduction. How I remember this? I look at that word abduct. I think of a child being abducted. You take it away. The child gets taken away from home. Well, you abduct a leg or an arm, you're taking it away from the midline of your body. So if your arm is down to your side, this arrow is showing moving it away. That is abduction. Again, if we had another arrow showing it coming back toward, that would be adduction. Adding it back to my body. So if I were to take this arm and move it back toward the midline of my body, that would be adduction. And again, there is a video. You can see how hard it is to illustrate these just in a picture. Again, the main thing when you're looking at a diagram, you have to look at the arrow. So here the arrow is showing us moving the arm from this position to this position. So that is moving it away, so that is abduction. Here the arrow is showing moving the leg from this position to this position. So bringing it back toward our body, that is abduction. So again, in these diagrams, in order to understand what's happening, you have to look at the arrow. The arrow tells you what's happening. Okay, supination or supination, you guys, I look at this word up. So when we rotate our forearm so that our palms are facing anteriorly or superiorly, basically making our palm face forward or up, that is supination. Again, think about soup, like holding a bowl of soup, your palms are facing upward or up. Your palms are facing upward, so that when you rotate your forearm so that your palm faces upward, or if you've got your arms at your side and you rotate it so that your palm faces forward, that, or I should say anteriorly, that is supination or supination. Soup, hold your bowl of soup. Or sup, rotate your forearms up. Or rotate your forearms so that your palm faces up. Sorry, I got just a little choked. I'm having some drainage or something. Okay? The opposite of supination or supination is pronation. So that when we rotate our forearm so that our palms are facing posteriorly or inferiorly, okay? Facing backward if our arms are at our sides, or if our arms are in front of us, facing downward. So supination or supination, our forearm is rotated so that our palms are facing superiorly, which is up, or anteriorly, which is forward if our arms are at our sides. Pronation is the opposite. Rotating our forearm so that our palms are facing downward, which is inferiorly, or posteriorly, facing backward if our arms are at our sides. So again, look at those arrows. Rotating it so that the palm is going from down to up, sup. Okay, that is supination. Or the green arrow, rotating it so that our palms are going from being up to being down. Looking at that green arrow, that is pronation. Okay, rotation is turning a bone around its axis. So we can have rotation to the left, we can have rotation to the right. Again, looking at those green arrows, basically when you shake your head no, you turn your head to the left, that is left rotation to the left, or you turn your head to the right, that is rotation to the right. So when you're shaking your head no, you are doing rotation to the left and rotation to the right. Turning your head around that pivot joint, that is your where your skull is joins your vertebral column. Circumduction is the movement of a body part so that it outlines a cone in space. This is mainly can be done with your ball and socket joint at your hip and your shoulder. So when we take our arm out, like we see here in this picture, and notice how we rotate it so that we rotate our arm so that our hand draws a circle. If you draw a circle with your hand, then you're actually making a cone in space. Okay, so circumduction, I think of circle. Rotate, I think of shaking my head no. Circumduction, I think of circle. So that when we are moving our arm at our shoulder so that our hand draws a circle in space. That is circumduction. You can do the same thing with your leg. Standing up, you really can't do it, but if you lay on your side, your ball and socket joint of your hip will do the same thing. Hold your leg out or up, and then use your foot to draw a circle in space. That is circumduction. Inversion is turning the sole of your foot medially. So again, at your ankle, you turn the sole of your foot. Look at your arrow. Here's your foot normal. Turn the sole of your foot so that turn it medially. Turn it toward the middle of your body so that the sole of your foot kind of points inward. That is inversion. So I think of the sole of my foot inward. That's inversion. Eversion is just the opposite. Here, look at the green arrow. We have our foot normal. We move our foot so that the sole of the foot faces laterally. It faces outward. That is eversion. Protraction, you guys, you can do this with your head. You can do this with your mandible. You can do this with your shoulders. Protraction is when you move your body part anteriorly or forward in a horizontal plane so that you move it straight forward. So here we're showing the shoulder. If our shoulders are normal and then we protract them, we move them forward, kind of like we're slumping forward. Okay, that is protraction. The opposite of that is retraction. If you move them from a protracted position back, that is retraction. Or if you're standing in a normal position and you move your shoulders way back like you're trying to stand up straight and have good posture, and you stick your chest out and you move your shoulders back, that is retraction. And so that's what this is showing. Moving those shoulders posteriorly or backward in a horizontal plane. You can also do this with your head. Okay, if you move your head forward, just straight forward, anteriorly, that is protraction. If you move your head back to its normal position, or if you're in a normal position and you move your head even further back, that is retraction. Elevation is lifting a body part superiorly, lifting it up. So you can do this with your shoulders, like when you shrug your shoulders to say, I don't know. So shrug your shoulders up, that is elevation. Okay, you can also do this with your mandible. When you close your mouth, that's elevating. You're elevating your mandible. When you close your mouth, you bring it superiorly. You bring your mandible up. Depression is the opposite of elevation. When you open your mouth, you depress your mandible. Okay, elevate, I think of an elevator. It takes you up. Depress, I think of, oh, you're depressed, you're down. So you bring it back down. So when you open your mouth, you depress your mandible, you bring it back down. When you have your shoulders shrugged, and then you bring them back to their normal position, that's depression, bringing them back down. So elevation is shrugging your shoulders, bringing them up. Depression is bringing them back down to their normal position, moving that elevated part back down inferiorly. So close your mouth is elevation, open your mouth is depression of that mandible. Okay, this is the video of, this is definitely going to have the 7 different things that are used to name muscles in this video. He will talk about that. And then he will also talk about origin and insertion and things like that as well. So good idea to watch that video. And then this video is the video that I was talking about. And again, I'm not showing these videos because I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube for copyright infringement and them take my video down. Because if they take my video down, then you won't have it to watch. But watch this video for sure, at least the first like 3.5 minutes. The first 3.5 minutes we'll have this girl doing lots of different movements. She will be doing some that I didn't talk about on here, but I think she does all of the ones that I did talk about. I think she does all the ones that I did talk about, and she will also do some that I didn't really talk about specifically. But watch these so that you can get a better idea of what these movements are, because as I said, it's hard to talk about them and illustrate them to you in 2-dimensional pictures. It's much easier to understand these movements in 3 dimensions watching somebody actually do the movement. So definitely watch this so that you will understand all these actions of muscles that we'll be talking about next week. Again, please let me know if you have any questions, any concerns. Email me. Send me a message on Google Classroom. Email me your number if you think you need me to talk to you or video chat with you. And I will, try to clear up anything that's not clear to you, anything you don't understand, anything you're having trouble with. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your week and a great weekend. We'll talk to you later. Hope to get to see you soon. Bye-bye.